Hi, I'm Ashley Dickson, and I'm here to talk to you guys tonight about a whole bunch of things, but basically about what my life has been like for the last 20 years or so. I'm an addict. I have about 4 years in recovery right now, a little over, which is exciting. But for about 15 years, I struggled with active addiction and making really poor choices. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Some of it's going to be really dark and depressing, but I hope some of it's funny. So I hope that nobody feels too down about this. I'm going to talk for a little while, and then I'm going to let you guys ask any questions that you might have to further understand anything. One thing I do want to say is this is 100% my experience. It is not every person's experience who has substance use disorders, but a lot of what I went through is pretty deeply related to where I grew up and what my life was like during and after high school. And yeah, that's pretty much it. A little bit about me right now. I just graduated with my associates in chemical dependency counseling. I was drawn to it because I'm a person in recovery. I'm working on my human services bachelor's at SUNY Cortland right now. So I do, at this point, have a little bit of clinical background, but primarily I'm going to be speaking about my experience and what it was like for me personally. So, yeah. So I had my first drink when I was maybe 13-ish years old, which is the national average. But it wasn't like a big deal. It was at a family party. It was okay. Didn't get drunk right away, of course. I also had, just lots of family stuff where we would get together and have parties like that. So it was, drinking alcohol was fairly normalized for me as a young adult. Not everybody in my family drank, but those who did enjoyed it. I also grew up knowing that my grandfather was in recovery and had been an alcoholic for a very long time, so I was aware that sometimes people had issues with it, but I didn't think it would happen to me, didn't think it was going to be a problem. In late middle school, I started having some really serious mental health issues. I tried to kill myself for the first time when I was about 12 years old, maybe 13, and then again in my teen years when I was 15 or 16 or so. So there was a lot going on for me mentally, and I was not really prepared to deal with a lot of the things that my emotions and my life were bringing to me. So it was frustrating, and I started looking for ways to deal with it, and a lot of those ways were not super healthy. When I graduated from high school, which barely happened, and honestly, props to my dad for really forcing me through that. I graduated from high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I decided to come here to TC3. I was 18, it was 2005, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had freedom, which is a disservice to my parents, but it's how I felt at 18. I made friends, which was great. I met people that I had never experienced before because I went to a very white, not culturally diverse school. I went to Dryden. We're white, we all know it. So I was meeting people that were from different places that had different goals in their lives, and one thing that we all had in common is we wanted to go party. So I spent pretty much 3 months just getting wasted every night. I tried pot for the first time, I tried some other stuff for the first time, I started smoking, and I failed gloriously at school. I dropped out before November. I don't even think we were at the halfway mark in the semester before I stopped going to classes. So my parents were like, you should probably drop out before this costs you more money than it already does. So I did, and I worked really shitty retail jobs for a really long time. And I bounced from place to place because I was still drinking I was still drinking, and I was still using drugs when I could find them. I was developing a pretty righteous weed habit at the time because it was the easiest thing to get, and I kept dating people who dealt drugs. So when you do that, you kind of, there they are all the time. And I would bounce from job to job because I would keep it together just long enough to start feeling like I was better than that place. And then I would leave before they could fire me for really not doing a great job. And that continued for a very long time. When I was 21, I had a really nasty fall down a flight of concrete steps in the dead of winter. It hurt really badly. I thought I was fine, and then a week later, my back did a weird thing, and I had to go to the doctor, and they did x-rays, and they said, you're fine, lose some weight, and your back won't hurt anymore, and they gave me some pills. They gave me some really good pills. And then when my back still hurt, they wouldn't give me more. And that really started for me a pretty nasty and long addiction to opiates because it was the only thing that made my back stop hurting, and I was still trying to find ways to deal with the other stuff in my life that I was really unhappy about. I was working shitty retail jobs. I was making not enough money to live on my own or even really live with other people. I was desperately unhappy, and I was starting to do things that I was not proud of then, and I'm still not proud of now, in order to get what I needed, whether that was a drink at a bar, or more drugs, or just a place to live. I was doing what I felt like I had to do, and those were some not great things. I started to try to quit when I was maybe 25-ish. I remember sitting in a bar, and I looked at the bartender and I said, I think I might be an alcoholic. And the bartender said, maybe. There's a meeting down the street. And I was like, cool. And then I finished my drink and ordered another because I was not actually ready. I ended up moving in with a very good friend of mine who said, listen, no more drugs. Drink if you want, but no more drugs. And she helped me to quit. And I slowly weaned myself off of everything. I don't have a lot of very strong memories of that time in my life, partially because of the sheer amount of alcohol I was drinking, partially because I was still using some drugs. But somehow I got through that, and I thought that I'm better now. I've stopped doing the drugs. Alcohol I can control. I even said that to a therapist when I first started seeking treatment. I said, you know, I've quit doing everything terrible, so I don't want to hear it about my alcohol drinking. Like, I don't want to hear about it because I've got that under control, and I'm not doing opiates anymore, so it's fine. You know, I'm not smoking weed anymore, so it's fine. So 3 years later, when I was about to turn 28, my life was still a mess. And when I say a mess, it means so many different things. I mean, again, shitty jobs that really sucked, having no money ever, spending what little money I had on alcohol mostly, but also I was just desperately unhappy, and I couldn't control anything that was happening to me, and I couldn't pay my bills. At that point, I was seeing my family maybe twice a year, and they lived 8 miles away from me. I missed a lot of my sister growing up. I missed a fair amount of my brother growing up. I get kind of teary-eyed about this because it was really important to me to be there, and I wasn't. So it got to a point where I couldn't pay my rent anymore, and it was an emergency. And my best friend looked at me. I was living with her and another person, and she looked at me and she said, I'm done. You need to do something. And I had no idea what that was going to be. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I called my parents, which is what I always do, and they're always there, bless them.
So my parents decided, you know what, you can move back in with us for a few months, get back on your feet, figure things out. I was like, okay, cool. And my best friend looked at me and she said, that's cool, but also not good enough. You need to get help. You need to do something. And I was like, all right, what do you want me to do? And she said, no, what do you want to do? So I had very little interest in pursuing mental health at that point. But you know, my grandfather had been in a 12-step program, so I'll give it a shot. And she said, you pick one and I'll take you to it every week. Okay, cool. So I picked a meeting and I started to go. And that was when things started to suck less, but also more in many ways. The worst thing about recovery is having to deal with all of the stupid, dumbass decisions that you've made, in my case, for the last 15 years. You know, I had my high school degree, but I had no marketable skills. I mean, I'm really good at selling stuff, but that's not, you know, particularly helpful. And I really struggled those first 6 months. My back got worse, but I got it treated. That cost a fortune. But I wasn't in pain anymore, so that was nice. But I spent the first year of being sober, being in recovery, facing a lot of really stupid shit that I'd done, and rebuilding a life that many people were 10 years ahead of me, at least. All of my friends had graduated from college and had really rewarding jobs in a field that they loved, and I was still working retail. And I was still frustrated with all of that. But generally, I was a lot happier. So about a year into recovery, I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I came back to TC3, and it was a huge difference. I have been blessed with a very strong support network of people who have helped me every step of the way. And I feel really fortunate about that. And that kind of brought me to where I am now. I always think that my story is going to be longer, and then I'm like, oh, 10 minutes for 10 years, that's about right. I know I said 15 years in the beginning. A lot of my stuff really started when I was a teenager, but the really heavy drinking and drug use was when I was a little bit older. But yeah, so here I am now, feeling a lot better about the decisions I've made for the last 4 years, and feeling like if I can do it, just about anybody can. But also, I mean, I guess the whole point of what I said when I created these flyers with Rhonda, I'm remembering, I'm supposed to talk about being the life of the party, which is what I was for a really long time. I was the person you wanted at your party because I would get drunk and I would make things fun. I would come up with crazy ideas and things we could do. I would say the raunchy things that nobody else would say because I was drunk and I didn't care. I would probably sleep with somebody. And I was a blast to be around. And one of the reasons it was so hard for me to give up drinking specifically was that I thought that I wouldn't be fun anymore. And I can tell you right now, I am still the most interesting person you can have at your party. I have stories. I have so many stories. And I'm fun. I'm a fun human. I don't need alcohol to be amusing or to tell a joke or to connect with somebody and have that late night conversation that gets all weird and philosophical. Like, you don't need alcohol to do that. You just need 3 a.m. and sleep deprivation. So that's important to me, that people realize that you don't have to be drunk to be a fun person to be around. I go to many events that are sober. There's no alcohol or drug use there, and I've had some amazing connections with humans. You make a lot better connections with people. The first couple years that I was in recovery, I chose to not go to bars or any place that did serve alcohol because it felt safer for me to not be around it at all. I'm still very cautious about where I choose to go to parties, but you know, I can be around a group of people that have had a couple of drinks and I'm okay. That took a long time to get there. But I can tell you, as the only sober person at a party, it is really fun to watch drunk people. They have no idea. And there's always a sobering moment where I'm like, oh, that was me. That was me. But now I remember everything that happens at parties, and I can tell people later how ridiculous they were or how funny they were, you know. So it's so much better now in general. I guess that's really all I really have to say. But if anybody has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them from my own experience or anything like that. So nobody ever wants to ask the first question. Let me think. I spoke to a group of high schoolers last year about this, and I'm trying to remember some of the questions that they had for me. Oh, goodness. No, I'm coming up blank. They had great questions. I ended up talking for like half an hour just from one or two questions. It was great. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the narrative that you've given us, and it seems like there were a lot of contributing factors to, you know, getting to a unsustainable place.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, how I'm hearing it, it was almost that first semester in college that seems like the normalizing of this behavior that really kind of catapulted you into a place of no return.
Sure, absolutely. College as a catalyst was definitely part of it. I mean, full transparency, there were plenty of unhealthy choices that I made in high school.
Sure, yeah.
I would say the first time I really had a problem with a specific drug was when I was probably 14 or 15 years old. But it was caffeine pills, fully legal, very easy to get. But the amount that I was ingesting was massive and super unhealthy, and I had a lot of trouble putting that away. But yeah, when I hit college, suddenly it was okay to go out and to drink crazy amounts of alcohol and do whatever drugs were around. And there were a group of people that I spent a lot of time with that I cared very much about and still do. Keep in touch with a couple of those people. And it was okay. It was cool. It was what we did. I was probably the only person in that group that actually found it unsustainable. Plenty of the people that I partied with were doing fine. You know, they were Phi Beta or whatever, and you know, passing all their classes and going through their degrees. It's not everybody that has that problem, but it definitely brings it out sometimes. If somebody is inclined towards substance use disorders, it definitely happened for me. I mean, I was not in the best place mentally when I came here for the first time, but it definitely was a recipe for disaster for me personally to come here and be with that group of people that was partying all the time. Yeah, I feel like college does that for a lot of people. I mean, to put on my clinical hat for a second, statistically, a lot of college students qualify as having a substance use disorder, but the majority of them graduate and they're fine. They're totally fine for the rest of their lives. It's a very small percentage that has a long-term issue with it. I don't think, if I had not come to college, if I had not done that semester here, I think I still would have had a problem.
Still would have found.
I think I absolutely still would have, yeah, because it was there already. it just was exacerbated. Yeah.
And that, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna ask, what do you do now?
So right now, I have a bunch of jobs. I'm a full-time student at SUNY Cortland in the Human Services Department. I also work here at TC3 with the recovery program as a recovery program specialist. We're working to create a support network for students who identify as being in recovery or identify as being affected by substance use disorder, which means a lot to me as a student with a substance use disorder. And I also work at a bookstore in Ithaca. I'm their bookkeeper. It's not something I ever anticipated doing either. So, yeah.
Do you find things more enjoyable being sober now?
You know those cheesy allergy commercials where they're like, everything is fuzzy when you have allergies, you can't see anything? And then it's as cheesy as that is, that's very much what my life has become. For everything. So things that suck a whole lot more, but things that are amazing or good or even just like kind of okay are so much better. It's like being able to taste food for the first time after having a cold. And because I'm able to experience all of that the way I'm meant to as a human now, I'm able to deal with it too. Like that's the biggest thing. Things that suck still suck, but now I can address them and handle them in a healthy way. And that is really, yeah. It's probably the best part, honestly. I mean, the things that suck could go away. I would love that. But that's not how life works. So.
Yeah, without naming names, how did it affect you when people that you knew and partied with and that we went to school with, you found out that they had passed away?
So, context for people who didn't go to Dryden. At least 3 of my classmates have passed away in the last 14 years. And wasn't particularly close with any of them, one of them. And it sucks every time. It just sucks because we were a really awesome group of kids. Like, I mean, it was high school. Everybody sucks in high school. And we had cliques, and everybody had feelings. But, like, they were people that you would never have expected. And I think that's a big thing, you know. A lot of my friends, when I told them I was in recovery, they were like, you don't have a problem. And I think, you know, I don't want to speak to these people's experiences, but it was a shock to me. For all of them, because you just don't anticipate that kind of problem ever. It's hard because we don't talk about it enough. We don't see it, and in part for myself, you know, a lot of people were shocked to find out that I had addiction problems, that I had a substance use disorder, because a lot of my use was hidden. I would do it by myself or with people that my friends didn't know. Like once I got out of like the whole college situation early on, I didn't, you know, I kept up with a couple of those people, but generally didn't see people who would recognize that what I was doing was unhealthy. I was a different crowd that none of them believed they had a problem. So I feel like it's always a gut punch when you find out that somebody you know has passed from this. And even outside of my classmates, you know, I lost my first friend to addiction when I was, I want to say 20. I had a friend who overdosed, and I felt so responsible, and I kept right on doing it. I did not even stop, did not even think about it for a minute, just figured they couldn't handle it, but I can. And every time I've lost maybe half a dozen people since then, people that I've met before I joined recovery, and and since. And every time it just feels like, why aren't we talking about this more? You know, why aren't we seeing this? And what can we do? Which is why prevention is so important to me now, why recovery is important to me, why I talk about this, even though it's like, whew, could use a tissue. It's hard. It's hard to talk about this, but it has to be talked about. Yeah.
So any friendships that you may have lost that maybe you were close to at the time, have you patched any of those relationships?
Ooh, so yes and no. I have been extremely fortunate that my best friend has stuck by my side for, God, 35 years, not 35, I'm not that old yet, 25 years she's been by my side and has absolutely put up with some serious bullshit from me. She has put up with everything, and I'm very lucky that she's stuck with me. There are people that I knew from the before time that I don't speak to anymore, that I don't spend time with anymore, because they're not healthy people for me to be around, regardless of their decisions. It was, for me, such a distinct line between who I was close friends with and who I partied with, that there was less damage done, I believe, to relationships. I mean, people knew. For the most part, I've had very accepting friends that have supported me. The biggest relationship was with my family. Thank you so much. The biggest relationship that I've had to work really hard to fix has been with my family. Because like I said, I missed a lot of my siblings growing up. Didn't get to be around for that kind of stuff. And I was around just enough for my family to not really realize how bad it was. But in the last 4 years, part of, the first 6 months that I was in recovery, I lived with my folks, which do not recommend. Love them. They've done so much for me, and they continue to do so much for me. But don't live with your parents after 25. It's just not a good time. But living with them did give me the opportunity to start a relationship with my sister that I had up until then not been able to have. And for the first time since I was maybe 18, 19, I was having conversations with my dad that didn't end in a fight. And it's to the point now where I feel like I don't want to speak for them, but I feel like there is a trust there now between me and them that was not there pretty much since I was 14, that I'm working to repair. So, I didn't want to get this weepy, I'm sorry. So it was hard, though, I will say, to cut out the people that I did party with. It was hard to make the choice to end those relationships, because so much of my identity lay in being that person that was fun to be around. And it took me a while to realize that I didn't need to be around those people or be doing those things to be fun and to enjoy my life. So. All right, I'm ready for another hard one. One of the things that one of the kids asked me last year was whether or not I ever got into legal trouble. And my response to that is yes and no. never because of my use. I did do a stupid thing when I was 18. And everybody at the place I worked thought that I was being arrested for drug charges, which should have been a flag, but it was not. It was something completely separate. But then the follow-up question to that was, but if you knew all of these dealers, did you turn them in? And that question caught me off guard coming from a teenager. And my answer is no. I never went to the police about any of the people in my life that were using drugs or dealing drugs or anything like that, for a complicated host of reasons. Primarily, I did not want to put them in danger, but also it just didn't occur to me that that would be a thing to do. Don't think it would be necessarily helpful to those people who also had substance use disorders to be sent to the police in any way. I think that if they had put themselves at a health risk, I would have absolutely called 911, but I was never in that position, thankfully. Now I'm Narcan trained, so I can handle it. But yeah, so it's tricky when you and all your friends do illegal things and you stop doing the illegal thing. Do you tell you don't. It's hard. It's hard to even think about. So.
What would you say to somebody if they have a friend or loved one that they suspect has an, substance abuse or, disorder? What should they do?
If you have a friend or a loved one that is suffering from a substance use disorder, it's hard and it hurts. I have friends that still are in active use and it hurts. The best thing you can do is love them and be there as much as you are able to be there while still taking care of yourself. That's honestly the most important thing for anybody, is take care of yourself. If it hurts you to be around somebody who's using or putting their life in danger, then don't do it. Be honest with them about it. That's a good move. Part of when my best friend approached me, she was like, I can't watch you do this anymore. And that was a catalyst for me. And it's not for everybody. But loving them and being there as best as you can, as best as you are capable, is helpful. Encouraging them to seek help, connecting them with resources, because none of us can be everybody's therapist. Even if you have a degree in it, you shouldn't have to do that for your close friends. But connecting them with people who can help them is a really important thing. It's a helpful thing that you can do. There are several places in Tompkins County and Cortland County that offer services for people who are seeking treatment. I can list them. I can list some of them. Alcohol and Drug Council of Tompkins County and CARS are excellent. And then in Cortland County, there's a peer program called Wishing Wellness, I believe, and Catholic Charities does some work. It's hard for me to speak directly to that because I, despite definitely needing to be in at the very least outpatient treatment, never got that help. I found a recovery meeting and stuck with it, and I mean stuck with it for a very long time. Those meetings kept me sober for a very long time, and still do when I go to them. They help a lot. So peer programs are excellent for that, whether it's a 12-step meeting or a recovery program or anything like that.
You ready?
Yeah.
what do you, so people who, have lived through someone else's substance use disorder often, have been hurt. And there are valid reasons for them to be hurt and angry and disappointed in relationships suffer. What do you want them to know in order for them to maintain those maintain, like, take care of yourself, maintain those boundaries? What do you want them to know for them to also retain compassion so that they don't get dismissive
Right.
and bitter?
Which is totally valid, absolutely. The anger and the bitterness and the difficulty feeling compassion for somebody is absolutely a valid feeling that I've experienced from people in my life who don't quite trust it yet. And for me personally, when I encounter somebody who's feeling some bitterness towards me or some frustration or anger, even it being held over from those days, I personally remember that I haven't proved to them yet that I'm not that person anymore. So, like, as a person in recovery, I try not to expect people to just immediately jump on, like, oh, you're clean now, good for you, everything's great, you're a great person again. And it's not that people that are in active use are bad people. They're not, and we know that. But it is hard to hang on to that compassion when you see them doing stupid shit over and over again and hurting themselves and hurting people around them. The way I keep my compassion is to remember that that's not them. It's something inside them that is controlling them, that is not letting them be the person they want to be, that is not letting them be the person that I love, but the person that I love is still in there. And that is a really easy thing to say and a really hard thing to do. And that's why I think it's really important to be honest if you have somebody in your life that's still using substances, is to be like, I can't do this today. I can't do this right now. I need to not see you for a little while. And in my personal experience, generally we get it because it's no secret to us that we suck. After a certain point, it may be a surprise for a little while, but after a certain point, it's no secret. Like, it was not a shock to me when my best friend said, you need to deal with this. I knew that I was an absolute wreck of a human being. I couldn't handle anything, without a drink. And having her say, we're done with this, I can't do this anymore. I mean, it hurt, because of course it hurt, but it wasn't like, how dare you? It was just, man, I suck, and it helped me personally find a solution other than drinking and using drugs, to have somebody be that honest with me and have it come from a place of, I love you, but you suck right now. So I hope that's helpful.
That's awesome that person could be that for you.
Yeah.
There's so many times when that's not always the case.
I was extremely fortunate to have this person in my life. I don't know if she's going to end up watching this. I don't know if I want her to. But she knows, and I've told her many times since. My proudest moment in recovery is after I had been sober for a little while. She was in a position where she needed a place to stay for a couple of months, and I was able to give that to her. And that meant the world to me, because she had taken me in so many times before. She had taken me in after nasty breakups. She had taken me in when she knew I couldn't afford the rent. Like, she had put up with so much bullshit from me for such a long time. And again, like, I've known this woman for 25 years, and it was just being able to say, yeah, you can stay with me for a few months while you save up for that thing. Like, yes, I have achieved like what I want out of my life. And I really pride myself now on being in a position to help people in the way that she helped me. It's very important to me to be able to do that. So that's, if she watches this, I'm proud of myself. She knows, we still talk a lot. Oh, sorry, feedback. It's because I'm dripping all over. Yeah. Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Thoughts, feelings. Yeah. Oh,
Oh, sorry.
You might have already addressed this, but oftentimes folks deal with denial. Like, how was that process for you, or did you not go through that?
oh, I had that. I definitely had some serious denial issues. Earlier I talked about sitting in a bar. It was the Dryden Hotel, like just to bring it home. I was sitting in the Dryden Hotel, and I looked at the bartender and said, I think I might be an alcoholic. And they were like, sure, maybe, you know, and then I had another drink. Definitely for years thought that I had it under control. For years thought that I had it under control because, and this is important, initially I was gonna bring up this slideshow of pictures of me through the years, and I was looking at them again and I was like, there's no difference here. Like, my smile's a little more real now, but because I had a job, even though I kept leaving them for other lesser paying jobs, I had a job. I almost always had a place to live. I always had enough money to pay for my drugs and alcohol. And again, I had a job until I would leave it for another one. I would have a place to live until I couldn't afford rent and left. But to everybody outside of like my personal self, it didn't look like I had a problem. And I used that to tell myself that everything was fine. You know, I could still get to work on time. I wasn't binge drinking every single night of the week. I didn't have to drink every single day to handle things. But I was still an alcoholic. I drank every chance I got. I drank alone. I drank in massive quantities. May not have been every single day, but it was a problem. And it took me pretty much until another person said this is a problem for me to really realize it. Although, honestly, I also knew it. Like, I knew it. Just didn't want to admit it. So, yeah. You had a question?
I'm not sure I'm gonna word it right.
Okay.
But going through something like this, what I'm hearing is such a thorough breakdown of who you are, and like a reflection, like sitting with it and acknowledging it, and looking at all the bad decisions very clearly, and like deciding, okay, no more. And that's a lot of really hard, brave work. So congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
should be very proud of yourself.
Thanks.
And I don't think a lot of people do that. Or, right?
I mean, did you want to finish the thought?
Go for it.
Okay. So saying it now, 4 and a bit years into my recovery, makes it sound like I had this like, all of these things are wrong and it's time to make a change. It was very much not like that. It's very easy to look back and be like, yeah, I did all of this soul searching and totally handled it really quickly. It was not, no. It has taken me years to address the crappy person that I was for a really long time, and to identify the mistakes I made, and to apologize to the appropriate people, and to like make better choices, identify what choices I could have made, and then when it comes up again, make the right choices. That's taken a very, very long time. And it's not done. I still make terrible choices sometimes. Like, I am a human being. I fuck up a lot, like often. But when I do fuck up, I don't go get drunk about it. Now I have a really great therapist and a really great support network, and I have so many things that I focus on. So I feel like yes and no. I think a lot of people, when they find recovery, find it important to assess what they've done. I think it's really hard to do. It's definitely been a painful process. I don't like admitting that I did stupid stuff. I don't like admitting that I put myself in really unsafe positions. But I think that it's a big part of being in recovery is being able to identify, like, I drank about it because I didn't know what else to do. And I was not mentally healthy enough to make other choices. So, does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, you know, so a lot of people in recovery do have to go through that process in order to actually continue to be in recovery.
Yeah.
But I think it would be, I guess what I'm saying is it's a really hard, painful process, and it's really beneficial, and it really repairs relationships. How can we like do that before it gets to this really critical point? How can we start fostering that in our communities and in our culture?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a really broad question.
It's
but
a super broad
it's a
question.
broad question, but it just, you know, it's something that I've really noticed in a lot of recovery stories, and I, you know, had to do a little bit of that myself, and you know, and I just feel like let's do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. It's a super broad question, and again, I do not speak for everybody in recovery. It's strictly my own personal opinion and how I feel about it. I've been involved in 12-step programs before, and I have a fantastic therapist now, and my general feeling about it is everybody needs therapy, and everybody could benefit from the steps in some way. I felt that right from the beginning. It's like, why doesn't everybody do this? Part of it is the stigma, not just around substance use, but around therapy and mental wellness. And I really think that if we start to address that, where it's like, you know, if something's wrong, talk to somebody. Building relationships that are healthy and that extend beyond a significant other, that's also been very important to me. Whether I'm single or dating somebody, I have a group of friends that I can go to with anything. And that has been really pivotal for me, is having somebody I can message and be like, I'm having a terrible day. And they'll be like, oh my God, let's go get Slurpees, you know, and whatever it takes. So I think that fostering a society where we have strong supports from more than just one person, and where we encourage people to be mentally well by seeking help from professionals as well. I don't think that you need to have some horrible mental illness to be in therapy, honestly. I mean, I've been seeing my therapist for 3 years now. I could probably stop going. I'm not going to, because I benefit so much from having a person that I can talk to about everything in my life. It's why I still go to meetings every once in a while too, because I benefit from hearing other people's stories and from knowing that I am not the only human being on this planet with this problem, you know, and I definitely spent a lot of my youth thinking, nobody gets what I'm going through. Nobody gets it. And part of that is just very much a teenager thing, so much. But part of it was just feeling like I was alone. And it's so much easier to drink and do drugs when you feel like you're alone, even in a group of people, you know? So I think that if we try to encourage people to share their stories, whether they're stories of recovery or mental health or anything, and show people that, like, you're not the only one who's, you know, sat in a bar wondering if they're an alcoholic. You know, you're not the only one who's dealt with depression, who's dealt with anxiety, who's dealt with anything, and that every single one of us knows somebody, if not ourselves, who has gone through a similar thing, and then we can discuss it and we can make changes. I would love to see that. Just would be amazing to live in a world where people are not embarrassed by having problems, because we all have problems. I could do one more question.
Do you have any goals?
Goals, oh my God. They're relatively new, like within the last 4 years, I'm not gonna lie. Yes, I am going to get my bachelor's in human services. I will graduate next spring, so 2020. I'm thinking about moving to a different city. I haven't fully confirmed that yet, but I'm looking at grad schools because I would like to get my master's. I would love to work in prevention specifically. I think it's a really important thing to address how we as a society deal with things. I feel strongly about the stigma associated with mental health issues and with substance use disorders, and I want to change that. So that's a very long-term goal, but short-term is graduate. And I feel confident that I can achieve, at the minimum, the short-term goal. I mean, long-term goal, might have to leave that to the very young people, but it's what I want. Yeah.
That's
Can you just touch real quickly on the person-first language? Because I think that's important for
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of the way I've spoken tonight has been using person-first language, which many people might be familiar with because of its common use in talking about minorities. So instead of saying Black person, you say person of color. Person-first language is really healthy and addresses the stigma a lot by changing the way we think about things. So when I say the word drug addict, in your brain you get a mental image of a very specific kind of person. That person probably doesn't look like me, although it might now that I've been sitting here talking at you for an hour. But when I say a person with a substance use disorder, you don't immediately think of what's in your head when you hear drug addict. It changes the way you think, and it reduces the stereotypes that your mind will automatically apply. So the terms that I try to use are person with substance use disorder, people in recovery, a person in recovery, a person who abstains, any of that kind of language where the first thing you're saying is, this is a person. This is a person first. And sometimes it's hard because within our core group, people with substance use disorders will often say, I'm an addict, I'm a junkie, I'm whatever. But when I speak about people in recovery, I use person-first language to start that fight against the stigma.